Hey everyone, welcome to today's session. And this is the profile evaluation session. My name is Karthik and I represent August Academy. So I will be hosting today's session on behalf of JMAN Club. Let me take a couple of minutes to introduce myself and my company. Like I mentioned, my name is Karthik. I am an alumnus of IIT and IIT Madras and Stanford University, sorry. I have been running August Academy since 2013. So that's the last 8.5 years. And we have had the very good fortune of working with some of India's best and brightest young minds. And we have helped them get into several top 20 universities across the world. So within the US, our students have gotten into Harvard, Chicago Booth, Kellogg, MIT, Columbia, Tuck, Darden, Michigan Ross, pretty much every top school out there. In Europe, my students have gotten into London Business School, INSEAD, HSA, IE, IESA, and SRD, Oxford and Cambridge as well. Within India, my students have gotten into ISB, and in Asia Pacific, my students have gotten into NUS and HKUST. That's about it from me for the introduction. Today's session is not about us, but it is about Harshal and it is about Shivansh. And we are going to be talking to these two candidates, and hopefully we will be able to help them decide what they want to do with their MBA aspirations. Abhijit, can we take it to the next slide, please? All right. So this, I believe, is Harshal, correct?
Yeah. Hey, Karthik. Good to connect with you.
Hey, Harshal. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited for this session.
Wonderful. I'm excited as well. Where are you calling in from?
So I'm calling you from Mumbai. I'm based in Bombay. Not my hometown, but I work from Bombay.
Okay. So we are at 7:35 p.m. India time. Why don't we take about 3 or 4 minutes to get your introduction? I know the slide is up there, but I would rather you speak about it for the benefit of our YouTube audience.
Absolutely. So, I'll try to say things that are not clearly mentioned in the slide, maybe. So, I basically come from a town called Akola, that's in the middle of Maharashtra. And I came to Bombay back in my first year of engineering, right? So growing up, there were not a lot of options that you're aware of, right? That in India that you want to essentially pursue the career in. So, very niche, took an admission into an engineering college in Mumbai University. There's a college called DJ Sangvi. So got admitted there for computer engineering. A couple of years into the engineering, I realized that I'm more inclined towards management kind of roles, or basically anything that interacts involving when dealing with people. I would love that.
This is 2 years into your college education, or this is 2 years into your work experience?
2 years into the college education, right? Like I realized that I was enjoying more working parts of different committees, different, groups in the college and different student chapters than, actually being in the lab and coding, right? So that's where, I started exploring other things. And at the same time, I kind of got the bug of tracking. So I just randomly would just wake up and go to a website, see which, groups are going out for a track. At that end point in time, this things was not much organized, right? I would just join any random group, right? And we'd go for like a weekend track in the Sayadri somewhere. And that kind of, got like very regular with me, right? Because I used to, in Bombay, I used to feel like open spaces, right? And that used to be my escape. And that got kind of, like I got a tracking bug and I got too deeply involved into tourism. So I thought that, after the engineering, maybe tourism is something that I could also pursue as one of the career options as well, right? Instead of just becoming like a pure engineer or a coder. And that's essentially, where I ended up even going and doing like a certificate of mountaineering course in Jammu Kashmir. So there's an institute called Jawar Institute of Mountaineering there. I spent almost a month training with the military, learning all the equipment, scaling peaks around there, properly on the military wall, living like, one of the military personnel. And I came back, I started my own organization called Travel Therapy, right? Just to basically, weekend trips to people, something on the part-time while I was in college. This went on for the next 2 years, the last 2 years of the engineering. After engineering, I started my own venture as Travel Therapy. I basically were working on it full time. That's where, I met with an accident on one of my treks where, I can essentially got, I met with the accident on a mountain itself, where I kind of fall a lot of like close to 200 feet off a mountain, broke a lot of my limbs, and it took me around like 8 months to recover back. And that's something I want to talk to you, Karthik, about, because see like an 8-month gap in my resume, right? And so that was more about the recovery phase, right? And once I got back to Bombay after all the recovery and surgeries, I joined a company called the Great Next, right? Still with the travel bug, where the Great Next used to essentially sell adventure trips, right?
So this
Like
was
mountain biking and everything.
you finished college and then you tried running travel therapy for some time, and then you had your accident, and then you had the 8-month break, and then you joined the Great Next. Okay.
Yes. Right. So I joined more in the sales operations, the business part. It was a startup. We literally started with the smallest possible cabin you can imagine. Then we expanded the company to like a 20 people or so. I was working very closely with the founders there. Amazing experience, learned to basically do sales, learned to do basically operations, internal team management, all of those skills at a very early level. My first role in Great Next. Around 18 months down the line, I still wanted to travel, but this was more like a back-end office role, right? That still kept connecting me with the tourism industry. And one of the things I ended up realizing is, I really love the business development roles. I really love, closing, forming relationships, forming strategic partnerships with people, figuring out the next move for a company, especially in a startup or a small scale company. But, I was looking for more of a challenge, right? And not much technical challenges when you're working in the tourism sector, right? It's an amazing space to be. And that's where, I kind of got introduced to a company called Apollo Finvest, right? The current CEO and MD is Mikhail Inani. He's basically, one of the co-founders of PharmEasy, and then, he was at Hotstar. So he's basically been a serial entrepreneur, and I got a chance to work with him. So that's where, I kind of pivoted careers a little bit from the line. Instead of tourism, I came to fintech, but the role essentially stayed the same, right? Of business development, basically speaking with people, networking and such. And this is where I've been for the last 18 months. Currently, I'm heading the entire business development department at Apollo Finvest, which is also a public listed company, right? Listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange. And we are essentially a fintech. So, and this is planning for the next stage of my career, where I'm, considering doing an MBA, and, as the next step in my career at this point in time.
So when you say you're the head of business development, how big is the team that you lead?
So the team that I lead is essentially close to 5 people, including me. Yeah.
All right, perfectly fine. Yeah. And the Finvest is a traded share?
Yeah, it's a public listed company. We're listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange.
Okay, so does that mean it's a very large company with a large market cap?
So no, it's not a very large company. It's slightly smaller company. The market cap is close to, I think, 200 to 50 crores at this point. And,
and how
it's
many
a very
employees
lean team
across the company?
So we are a super lean team, right? We are close to 23 employees in the entire company, managing everything.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty
It's a tech
sizable
company, right? So
opportunity.
we like our biggest team is the tech team, right? So we are essentially a tech company that happens to be a NBFC as well, right? So we have kept the team is extremely lean at our end.
Okay, and you are a startup as well, as in it's a relatively new company?
So that's where the interesting journey is, right? The company has been from a while, but the entire startup structure, right? But what we essentially done, I'm not sure if you're aware, there's a company called Crossrow Bank in the US. There's something similar in the Indian ecosystem, where we're trying to build a platform for any company that wants to enter into the lending space, right? So it's pretty innovative stuff that we're trying to do here. We're working with one of the top brands across the country, helping them get started with their own lending journey, right? With all from license and regulations to tech and APIs to capital and whatever is required, right? So we are more like a platform towards them. And yeah, so that's essentially what the company does, right? So
when you say you focus on, when you say you focus on business development, your clients are going to be corporate entities along the lines of other NBFCs and retail banks.
I'm sorry, Karthik, I lost you. Can you come again? The last statement?
When you say you are into business development, your potential clients are going to be other NBFCs and perhaps retail banks, like a small finance bank or something along those lines.
So our clients would be, yes, there are certain NBFCs, but majorly all fintechs, right, would end up being a client. So if I were to give you a use case, right, let's say any company, right, like for example, let's say Zomato wants to start with a lending product, Zomato would end up becoming the client of Apollo Finvest.
Got it.
right?
Okay, got
So
it.
that's
Yeah.
the goal. And so yes, so that's where the interesting part is you get to deal with a lot of founders, a lot of startups who are essentially just trying to start out in their business or basically trying to launch a fintech, right? So you get to communicate a lot with them.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And your post MBA roles are, I can see it on the slide, but why don't you talk about it?
Sure. So as I said, right, I am extremely excited, and I get very intrigued working in networking kind of roles where I get to basically learn innovative things, talk to interesting people who are going to be like future leaders. So one of the things that I have been interested towards is basically working I want to be some in a manner of speaking connected with the startup world, right? Because that's what I've been working with and been very closely in touch with over the last 3 years, and I'm in love with that. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is either working in a VC firm or where I get to interact with a lot of startups, still help out figure out how to basically help them create their model, to consultancies who are focused again on the startups or the fintech space, or a role which is basically a growth or leadership role in some kind of a tech organization, and preferably a fintech, right? Since that is the background, and I do love fintech.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And your target MBA programs are Haas, Columbia, Duke, and London Business School, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, what are your major questions, Harshad?
So my major questions, I think one of the things that I wanted to ask is regarding that 8 month gap. How do I go about displaying that in my application? Because as you
Okay.
see, right, it doesn't come out across very clearly in the resume. Also,
Uh-huh.
with respect to getting
What do you mean
admission
it doesn't
into
come
Haas,
across very clearly in your resume?
because in the resume it just seems like there is an 8 month gap, right? It doesn't say that I was basically recovering from an accident. That's something I didn't want to mention in a resume. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not. Other questions are more regarding the colleges and the target MBA programs that I applied for. I'm planning to apply this September.
Okay.
So like planning to basically start my course in 2022, right? Uh, the plan is basically that there's 4 colleges. The thought process around those colleges essentially they are either in the West Coast or basically in a financial hub like New York or in London. So basically keeps me closer to the fintech space, to the place where most of the budding startups would be, and that would give me a
Okay.
good opportunity to network. But main question is considering my GMATs, considering my work experience, and also I keep hearing this that I come from a very broad, diverse background, right? Like where it is essentially a male Indian male engineer, right? So how do I basically hatch that against my profile to basically get increase my opportunity to get into these programs?
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So, first of all, I think you've done great work. And so, congratulations on that. I'm really excited
Thank
to
you.
hear about this mountaineering journey that you have taken up. So sorry about the accident. I hope everything is
Yeah.
back to normal at this point.
Yes.
The reason I smiled when you were talking about your work gap is I saw this joke that was forwarded to me on WhatsApp about a week ago or something, right? And the joke goes something along the lines of someone in some other country is away on vacation, and so you send them an email, and the response that you get is, "Hey, I'm away on vacation and I won't be back for 3 months." And then I mean, depending on which region you're in, I heard an Indian version of the joke and I heard an American version of the joke as well. Okay, so but whatever it is, let's say you're in India and then somebody pings you and then this person says, "Hey, I'm undergoing kidney surgery, but I'll be back in 2 hours, so if you have anything urgent, please call me on my cell phone," right? uh,
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about. I think you had a perfectly justifiable reason for why you had to take the break. And if
Yeah.
that is not justifiable, then nothing else in the world is, right? On the resume, which is a data driven document, you will probably have the gap. And I really don't think you need to include anything about your accident in the resume. But almost every college will provide you with the option of presenting an optional essay. So when
Yeah.
that happens, definitely explain this. I think this is perfectly reasonable and nothing for you to be concerned about. So that's the answer to your first question. Now, definitely the entrepreneurial bug, it's very evident in whatever you have explained to me, and right from college days, if I may say so. So I can see an interest in entrepreneurship from a very early age. I can see an interest in travel and tourism and adventure sports because of the mountaineering activities.
Yeah.
And I can see recent experience in fintech. I don't know if it is necessarily interest or passion for fintech yet. It may be there, it may not be there. It could just be that this was a company that offered you a suitable position and you found it enjoyable, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Now, with regards to your post MBA career goals, I think at this point in time, at least, maybe you can avoid talking about venture capital firms. That's a very crowded space. It's a very niche space, rather, and it's very competitive to get into, and business schools know that. Now, there are two kinds of candidates who typically get into VC firms. One is somebody who's coming in with a core finance background, and the other is someone who's coming in with a very seasoned entrepreneurial background, right? And if you don't belong to either of these two categories of candidates, you're going to face a huge uphill struggle. So preferably stay away from talking about VC oriented goals. Management consulting is still fine. That's okay. The second goal that you talk about, which is growth and leadership in a tech organization and preferably a fintech, that seems reasonable as well. Okay, especially given your recent background. Now, when you say you want to work in a tech organization, typically the candidate that would have the advantage in that particular situation is someone who's already coming in with a pure tech background. Now, your undergraduate education is in technology, granted, but your work experience, even if it is in tech companies, it's not as a techie, right? Because you've been primarily in business development. So, be cognizant of that when you're presenting your goals. Understand that if you say you want to work in technology-centric roles, a software engineer is probably going to be better qualified than you are. So those aren't the kind of roles you are going to be talking about. Working in a tech organization itself is fine. You're working for a tech organization right now and you are in business development. So choose roles along those lines, right? So that's my advice there. With regards to target MBA programs, I think if you present the story well, you should definitely have a very competitive application to a top 15, let's say, if you're looking at US programs. So that definitely includes Duke. With regards to Columbia, slightly higher GMAT may be advantageous. That's my advice, or rather, that's my recommendation for any top 10 program for an Indian male engineer, typically. London Business School, the GMAT doesn't matter as much. In fact, Haas also, I think, as long as you are doing better than a 730, the GMAT doesn't matter as much. But these are two schools that are looking for a certain type of candidate, right? Haas looks for somebody who excels in, let's say, a tech entrepreneurial role, which you've done to a certain extent. But they're probably looking at someone who's more into core tech or something along those lines. And London Business School is probably looking for someone who's into core finance or something along those lines. So my sense is these are colleges you may wish to apply to if at all you wish to try, but you may consider them as stretch programs, right? So the sweet spot for you is probably going to be the 12 to 15 range, which includes your Duke, your Darden, your Cornell, your Tepper, your Anderson. That's typically. I don't know what the current ranking is. I know that the rankings keep changing year on year, but roughly these are some of the schools which are in that range. So nothing wrong in applying to Haas Columbia LBS. Treat them as stretch programs. But the sweet spot for you is going to be from Duke onwards. That's my sense here. Any other questions?
From basically a fintech perspective, right? I wanted to understand, like when you said that for Columbia and for I think Haas and other programs, like a higher GMAT score would be would be preferred, right? What would the range you talk about, right? So what is the range that I would be missing it by, right? Like, are we should it be like a 750? Should it be like a 760 range? Like, what should
750? Yeah, 750. Yeah. So again, it's not hard and fast, all right. I mean, typically a higher GMAT gives you an advantage, but a 740 is a great score as well. With a 750, I think you'll have a little bit more to your advantage. But you may still apply. Just bracket it in the stretch zone.
Sure. I saw essentially a question that popped up on the screen, right? Directed towards me. Am I expected to answer it, or like
Yes,
should I
please.
go
Yes.
ahead?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it.
yeah. So hey, Debabrata, I basically gave my GMAT a couple of months back, right? Back in the month of March and April. That's when I applied for my GMAT.
All right. Any other questions here, Harshal?
Sorry, I'm sorry, Karthik. I kind of lost you again.
Any other questions?
If I were to, let's say, I would still want to basically target, let's say, Haas or a Columbia kind of a university, right? What should I do apart from GMAT that would basically increase my chances to basically getting admitted to those programs?
Sure. I mean, nothing out of the ordinary. Present your candidature in the clearest and the most impactful manner possible. Be true to yourself when you're writing your essays. I think the rest of the story is all about presenting a good application. That's
Sure.
that's all there is to it. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk to Shivansh at this point. Hi, Shivansh.
Hey Karthik, how are you?
Doing very well. How are you?
Doing good, yeah. Doing good.
And where are you calling in from?
So I'm calling from Bangalore. I'm based out
Okay.
of Bangalore. I'm basically from Lucknow, but right now I'm living in Bangalore.
Yeah, all of us have been living in some house for the last 1.5 years or something. It really shouldn't
Exactly.
matter where, as long as we are getting fed, right?
Correct.
So, like we did for Harshal, do you want to take about 3-4 minutes to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Sure, Karthik. I'll just take a couple of minutes to give you a quick background about myself. I hope my audio is clear. I just ran out of battery for my headphones, so
Yeah.
thanks. So Harshal, so Karthik. So basically, I've done my engineering in production, and I'm typical male engineer. Like this video is all about that. So I graduated in 2016 from
Yeah, let me stop you for a little bit. I'm a typical male engineer as well, so that's
Great.
something that all three of us have in common. Go for it.
Awesome. So so I did my undergrad in production engineering in 2016 from a college in Pune University, and I did a decent amount of. I spent a decent amount of time in studies, but all I enjoyed during the engineering was things I did outside of my classroom. So I'm a big sports enthusiast and motorsports enthusiast. So all the 3.5 years I was part of the motorsports team of my college and represented our college on a national level in at least 5 competitions in the span of 3.5 years, and we also won multiple championships and also a lot of other awards during that time. And along with my engineering, I was also a part-time
When you
tutor.
say motorsports, do you mean you build high performance
Exactly.
vehicles like the SAE thing? Okay, got it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was part of SAE Baha for 1 year. Then
So you
along
were
with
not a
that,
racer, right?
I was not a driver. I was a team member of the. I was more on a technical front of design
Okay.
of the team. Then
Okay.
subsequently we transitioned. We formed a new team in the go kart space. So in the span of around 2.5 years, we formed a new team in go kart. So I was heading the subsystems, and then subsequently was the head of design and vice captain of the team. And we won quite some awards at nationals. So apart from that, I was also a private tutor during my engineering, and that was a whole bunch of the 4 years I spent there. Post my engineering, I joined GE General Electric as part of their operations management leadership program. So it's a rotational 2-year program focusing around core operations, supply chain management, with a strong focus on manufacturing and also the financial part of the manufacturing job. So I was basically during the 2.5 years in different roles in different plants of GE in India. So I was in Pune, I was in Bengal, I was in Hosur in Tamil Nadu for around 2.5 years, and focusing on completely different roles. Uh, the main point of that program was to send someone to a completely new location with certain targets, with certain objectives, and see how the candidate performs in the 8 or 9 months of time frame and deliver results, measurable results. So around 2.5 years went in that, and subsequent to that, I joined GE Aviation. So in GE Aviation, I was a program manager, focusing around sourcing and supply chain out of India region. A couple of years there, and then subsequently I moved to 6 months back into GE Healthcare. So this is my fifth business, sorry, within GE in the span of 5 years. And during this time frame also, I was engaged in not a great amount of activities, but a decent amount of activities in terms of volunteering for teaching underprivileged kids for almost a year with GE. Then there were few other things going on here and there. And off late, I'm engaged with an NGO called Greenpeace and working on the sustainability part from the last month or so. And that's something I'm really passionate about. So I thought of joining this org few months back, and it has been a good time with them. And apart from that, hobbies and interests, I think it's pretty much evident that motorsports, sports, and traveling is really interesting. And I'm an active investor in the Indian stock market and also a trader. So that's in a nutshell the last 4 years plus the 4 years of engineering. Also, in the meantime, I think you can see I did a micro masters in supply chain from MIT, and that was again funded by the company. And that was part of the education front to teach the these members. We have a cohort of around 7 to 8 candidates in India that the OMLP Operation Management Leadership Program. So we did this micro masters along with that program, and yep, that's it about me.
Okay, thank you. What is the MicroMasters about, Shivansh?
It's so it's about supply chain management, and MIT has a 1 year master's program in which they have 2 semesters. One semester is focusing on core analytics and quantitative aspects of supply chains, and what they did is they tie up with companies, and they also have this thing with Coursera where they offer 18-month program, which is equivalent to 1 semester in MIT. So this is something which we do along with our jobs. So that is, I spent almost 18 months to get this to get completed this module. It was quite an extensive one, quite data focused, quite a lot of maths involved in that, and it was a lot. It was kind of an amalgamation of supply chain and business operations, that how the decisions at the ground level really impact the top line or the bottom line of the businesses, and how the financial parts are related to or joined along with the supply chains that we work on. So I'm from production manufacturing. So all I work and do is our deal with is more manufacturing people. But what this program was intended to teach us was we just don't have to focus on the manufacturing aspect, but how that things that we do on the shop floor, whether it's a lean operation or a Six Sigma green belt, what I did, how those things impact the actual metrics of a business or industry. So it was pretty much structured around that.
Okay, great. And you want to get into management consulting, and you're targeting London Business School and INSEAD. What are your questions, Shivansh?
Okay, so thanks, Karthik, for asking that. So I had a few questions which I just wanted to discuss, and it might be a little familiar for other candidates also. So first thing is that I just give a very quick overview of the profile. I really don't know if I have very strong USPs or something which is pretty interesting or pretty different from other candidates. So what do you suggest can be a USP or can be an interesting factor which can play a good amount of role in applying to these colleges? That's my first question, and probably I'll come to the second one after some time.
See, I think you do have a strong USP, which is you have exposure to 5 different businesses within GE, and you have been selected to be a part of the operational management program, which I believe is reasonably selective, correct?
Yep.
So GE is known to be a company which has a good track record for training managers, and I think that exposure itself is great. I see aviation and healthcare on the slide. I don't know what other businesses you have worked in, right? And
I
you
was
also
with
worked in
transportation. Yeah, G transportation, manufacturing of locomotives, then
uh,
steam power systems, boilers, and then transmission and distribution, mostly on the electrical part.
yeah, I think this wide variety of experience itself is a very great place to start, and that would be to your advantage.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Now, Karthik, my next question is: so I know a lot of people go into management consulting, or they wish to go into management consulting. So, with my background, how easy or difficult it will be to land into this industry, and how strong a profile can be made targeting or setting a goal around this field?
Yeah. So for management consulting, I would recommend a target of 740 plus, 10 more points, right? Why? Because there's the popular notion that companies like McKinsey, Boston, and Bain have this filtration criteria where they look at a candidate's GMATs or equivalent GREs. Of course, last year there was this whole business of candidates being given waivers to apply. So I don't know how these policies will be shaped or changed in future. But that's something that's in place, right? And consulting is very competitive to get into because a good number of people want to get into consulting, partly because of this notion that you get to work on very interesting projects, and partly because of this desirable lifestyle that is projected in the popular media, at least. So 740 plus would be good. But apart from that, I think of all engineering candidates, you would be one of the prime candidates given your experience because of the diversity of experience that you've had. And presumably, you can demonstrate that you have taken up certain problems and you have delivered solutions to those problems, right? Now, uh, I can anticipate that you may have approached this differently than somebody who works in a tech company, for example. Someone who works in a tech company does not solve one problem after another. Rather, what they do is they are delivering a product and they have gated deliverables that are due every month or every quarter, something along those lines. And it's a very continuous process. Whereas in your case, based on what you've said, you moved to a new location and then you were given a period of 7 to 8 months and you were asked to solve something. And so hopefully you went through the entire problem definition process, which is you took some time to understand the problem, you took some time to set up the problem, explore a few solutions, test out a few solutions, maybe engage some consultants in the process, and then deliver a solution. And hopefully you've also stayed around for the implementation and measurement to see if things have changed. If you've been through this life cycle, then I think you actually will be a great candidate. And if you've done this 4 or 5 times through your stint at GE, then I think from a work experience point of view, you'll be great. You'll definitely be a good candidate for operations consulting. And equivalently, if at all you're interested in it, you may be a good candidate to get into operations management as well. Let's say at a company like Amazon, if that interests you.
Awesome. Sounds good. Sounds great, Karthik. My last question to you will be the programs that I'm targeting are like not very diverse. I'm very specific about LBS and NCR because I saw their profiles and these are little consulting heavy colleges. So again, at this point of time, I'm looking really to change my role, my industry, and also my location. So how big a factor that will be when it comes to applying to these colleges, and is there any particular advice you want to give while applying to, let's say, LSB, LBS or NCR with the profile I have? And I know, say, I don't have a GMAT score as of now, but let's target at least 740, something around that front. So considering I will be changing all the three aspects of my profile, uh, what advice will you give before or to at least introspect while applying to these colleges?
So I would have to caution you that NCR may be difficult if you don't have international experience. It's not an unqualified statement. Uh, about 80% of the candidates from India, especially who are successful at NCR, would have spent a reasonable amount of time working outside the country. 20% of the candidates from India do get in without international experience, but I mean, the 80 is bigger than the 20. So that's something to keep in mind as you're applying to NCR. And London Business School, the traditional focus is somebody who has a financial sector background. But having said that, I mean, that may only comprise of around 30-35% of the class, incoming class, max to max, right? So which means 65% of the class is still people from other backgrounds. So at both places, you would be coming in as the candidate with different set of experiences compared to the typical candidate that they are looking for. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it can work to your advantage as well. So at the end of the day, every college is looking for every candidate, every kind of candidate, and every college is actually capable of placing every candidate into every kind of post MBA career outcome. So we talk about some schools being consulting schools, we talk about some schools being finance schools. Yeah, to a large extent, a consulting school may take in a lot more consultants and produce a lot more consultants. but it also caters to technology folks, it caters to finance folks, and vice versa. So this is broadly the case. So think about why you want to target a European program. So that's one thing for you to keep in mind.
Mhm.
Think about why these two programs and demonstrate your interest for these two schools, because you seem very specific about this. And present your work experience as clearly as possible, and to the extent possible, present it in a measurable format. Talk about the outcomes that you have achieved at each one of your stints. I think these are some of the tips that you can keep in mind for presenting the best possible application.
That's really great, Karthik. Karthik, one quick point on the international aspect that you mentioned on NCR. So
Mhm.
I've not worked it at international sites, but I've been trained at three of G's international locations, a couple of times in US, once in China, and I've further been to US for multiple meetings, not multiple, but at least a couple of weeks long meeting. And in my current role also, I am predominantly dealing with international stakeholders from Asia and North America and South America also. So does that to a certain extent eliminate that gap that I've not worked outside India, or how do you put
uh,
that forward?
to a certain extent, yes. But from a uniqueness point of view, today we live in a world where a lot of candidates have similar experiences across sectors, right? It's very normal for us to get into telecom with somebody from the US or UK or South Korea or Japan. So a good number of people work with stakeholders from across the world. Uh, and this is true for everyone. I mean, if you have not worked abroad, then you have at least worked with people who live abroad, right? And who think differently from you too. So I think that is still meaningful in terms of working with an international cohort. But given that a lot of people would have had similar experiences, maybe from a uniqueness point of view, you may not be unique enough if you present that abroad.
Understand. Understand. Awesome, Karthik. And any red points or any areas which you see needs an improvement
No,
as an
nothing.
overall
I
profile?
think, yeah, I think both of you have great resumes. Both of you hopefully will be able to get into a top 15, top 20 kind of program. So, yeah, I wish both of you all the best. That's no red flags, nothing
Awesome.
on that sort.
Great. Thanks, Karthik.
All right.
So
Thank
that's
you.
it from my side.
Okay. Nikhil, back to you. What happens next? Okay, I think we have some questions coming up. What are the chances for an Indian male engineer with a history of arrears during bachelor's degrees? Um, if it's 2 or 3 arrears, I think that's fine. If it's 10 or 15, then I think some serious examination needs to be done. Hopefully, you've cleared everything, and hopefully, your GPA is not too damaged, meaning it's at least 6 plus or 60% plus. In which case, I think it's still okay for you to present your application. Try to get a good GMAT score, and uh, hopefully you've had good work experience as well. So that's what I would advise you. Right. Just hold on a minute, Nikhil. I know Harshal and Shivansh have been very happy guests today. Do we still need them to be visible, or okay? Uh, all right. Thank you, Harshal, and thank you, Shivansh. Very nice talking to the two of you, and hopefully my advice is useful to you as well. Taking more questions. One from Avinash. Would a GMAT of 730 act as a deal breaker for an Indian applicant who has had back-to-back promotions along with good organizational impact? I think a GMAT of 730 is excellent. So congratulations on that. Uh, I think what's happening is we are in a situation where a good number of Indian candidates have great GMATs, right? So if you have a profile that other people are also likely to have, in terms of what kind of company you work for and what kind of functional role you take up. Sometimes what happens is it appears that many people have the same resume, more or less. And once we hit that point, the GMAT becomes a differentiating factor. With the 730, I think you may still be able to target a top 20 or a top 22 kind of program. If you have something truly unique, you may still try to apply to higher ranked programs. I had somebody with a 730 get into a top 10 program last year, Dartmouth Duck. So we've definitely had that happen in the past. I had somebody get into Yale with a 730 before. I had two people get into Yale with a 730 before. So it's not such a bad thing. From a statistical point of view, it may be a little bit of a weakness. That's all. Yeah. What's next? Rashmi has a question. For an applicant with an average academic profile in 10th and 12th, being in the 70s to 80s, does it impact the probability of selection in top business schools, both globally as well as Indian schools? Whatever you did in school absolutely doesn't matter. Schools will probably ask you for your academic record from college onwards. So as long as that's taken care of, I think you should be good. And yeah, focus on your GMAT or your GRE as well. Does part-time work experience done during engineering add any brownie points to the profile while applying? I think it is useful. It's not going to count towards your work experience, which is your full-time work experience, but definitely, I mean, it can show a history of taking on responsibility at a very early age, for example. It could have helped you gain some experience which helped you get into a better job, for example. So definitely, I would consider that part-time work experience to be valuable. May not have a make or break kind of situation here to your application, but it will definitely add brownie points. I think you've chosen the right words. Do MicroMasters certifications, especially in tech courses, help in candidature for BSchools? How to portray it in good light? I mean, it is obviously in good light. So if you've done additional certifications or MicroMasters programs, then that definitely shows that you are a continuous learner. So there's nothing you need to do additionally. Do you need it? Perhaps not. So don't fret about it if you don't have it. Don't accumulate certificates just for the sake of accumulating certificates. I have talked to people who say, hey, you know what, I've done my CFA and I've done my FRM, but I'm actually working for a software company, right? I mean, why? Right? I mean, it's one thing to study because you're interested, but it's another thing to keep accumulating certificates, and especially in an area that has nothing to do with your main point of work, right? So as long as the certifications or the MicroMasters make sense, in the sense they've helped you with your work currently, or they add up towards your future goals, I think it makes sense. If you're doing something unrelated, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's probably not the best use of your time at this point in time. And regardless of whether it is relevant or not, there's nothing you need to do to portray it in good light. It is good just by definition. By the fact that it exists, I think it's good. How do you rate a quant hedge fund experience compared to traditional roles like consulting, IB? I think it's great, especially if you have modeling experience. That can definitely show that you are very high on the intellectual potential scale. But apart from that, these are different things, right? I mean, quant hedge fund experience is different from consulting, and it's different from IB to a certain extent. So nothing to be compared. They're all different and they're all great in their own ways. Aditya has a question. What are the chances for an engineer with an undergrad GPA of 8.24, 3 years of experience in a mid-sized consulting firm, and a GMAT score of 750 in a top MBA program like Duke, Columbia, Stern, and Booth? Depending on the nature of the engagements that you worked in, you may have a good shot at these programs. If you have not had very impactful experience, then these may be difficult. But if you've had impactful experience, then I'm not worried about the fact that you didn't go to an IIT or you didn't go to a McKinsey Boston Bain. You may still have a good shot. Chris Morris has a question. Can we apply to both HBS and Stanford GSB if work experience in a top-rated media house with exceptional impact and major industry recognitions? Yeah, I think work experience at the time of applying is 9 years. Yeah, I think you should be fine, Chris. Just make sure that you have good numbers on the GMAT. And yeah, that's about it. There's not a whole lot of people applying from the media sector. So you would be a diversity candidate, and schools would be interested to know uh, what kind of a voice you bring to the table. So definitely, I think you should go for it. Anjum has a question. Will a candidate with a 3-year undergrad program stand a chance? I don't think it makes a difference at all. As long as you have great work experience, you should just go for it. Dev Joshi has a question. Male engineer, 3 years work experience in R&D, 6 months international experience in Southeast Asia. MIT, HEC, NCAD. Do I need to get experience in other commercial departments also? Thanks in advance. This is not sufficient for me to answer your question. I think a good GMAT score is also in order. If you have a 720 or higher, I think HEC is definitely a par application. With regards to MIT and NCAD, I think you need to have demonstrated a little bit more leadership at work. And for MIT, maybe a little bit more leadership in a techno-entrepreneurial sense, preferably. Yeah. That doesn't mean you need to have commercial experience. It just means you should be the kind of person who's capable of working on an undefined problem and executing it by yourself. Rahul Gadekar has a question. If anyone already has an MBA with a 7 CGPA and average percentage in engineering, 58% with global investment banking experience with JP Morgan, what are the chances of converting top 20 business schools? So not every business school in the top 20 is happy to receive an application from someone who already has an MBA. Tuck and Darden are some of the programs that come to mind, perhaps Berkeley as well. But then there are some programs, especially the 1-year program at Kellogg in Columbia, where it's okay for you to apply if you already have an MBA. We've had a lot of candidates who've previously had MBAs or postgraduate diplomas, including from the Indian Institutes of Management, including IIM Ahmedabad, for whatever reason, right? And after about 4 or 5 years, these candidates feel the need to get some global experience and a top tier brand. And so they go out of India and then they try to get a top tier degree, right? So it's something that's very normal. The GPAs may not matter so much if you have a 750 plus. And yeah, I think you should be able to convert a top 20 business school. So just focus on your GMAT. That's about it. Samarth Mahajan. Is round 1 the perfect time for an Indian engineer male to apply, or round 2 also works fine? Round 2 is also fine. Just focus on getting a good GMAT score. If you're able to get it by June or July, I think you may be able to put in about 4 or 5 applications in round 1, and hopefully that should be sufficient. If you do it later, then the number of applications that you can put together for round 1 will go down, which means bulk of your applications will be in round 2, and that's fine. There's a very, very marginal difference. R1, of course, has all seats open, and that's not the case for R2. But the difference is entirely marginal. So it's always better to go in with a stronger application rather than a weaker application. Is a full-time internship opportunity considered as work experience? No, it's an internship and it's considered as an internship. Which schools are a realistic target for an applicant with 650 to 690 on the GMAT, 3.5 years of work experience in multiple startups, and 4 years of NGO experience with leadership positions? I'm a little curious to know what exactly you mean by NGO experience. If you spend some time full time, right? So if you work for an NGO, then I'm okay with the 690, right? I might still be able to pitch you for a top 20 program worldwide. But if it is part-time or extracurricular experience with the NGO, and your full-time experience is with 3.5 years, is of 3.5 years with multiple startups, then definitely a 690 or even a 650 will be very weak. In such a case, I would probably look at schools rank, let us say, about 40 to 60, roughly in that neighborhood. Target score for ISB and GMAT if the candidate has 86 in 10th, 91 in 12th, 80% in undergraduate from St. Xavier's, and 3 years at Deloitte USI. About a 700, 710. How much diversity will a candidate having semiconductor industry experience bring? You're an engineer, same like the rest of us, right? So let's look at diversity, right? I mean, we need to understand what exactly belonging to a diverse industry means. So if you look at the incoming classes and the profiles for most colleges, you'll see that about 30% will be coming in from a consulting background, okay, and about 25% may be coming in from a financial services background. About 25% will be coming in from an engineering background, and that includes people from the technology sector. It includes people from, let's say, the oil and gas sector, but of an engineering function. It may include people from the auto, aero sectors, which are very large sectors, other manufacturing, and the hardware sector, which includes semiconductors as well, right? Chemicals. So any stream of engineering that you can think of, all those engineers put together comprise about 25% of the class, and the bulk of those engineers are from the technology sector, right? So I don't think there is much to say in terms of diversity. You are an engineer, and be proud of it, and present your best possible application. I think that's the only advice I would say. Hi, can I get into pharma strategy consulting post a 2-year MBA? Background in pharma and a bit of consulting experience as well. Thanks. I'm not 100% sure on this. I don't know if pharma strategy consulting as a niche exists, but I've definitely worked with a lot of candidates whose previous experience was in pharma sales consulting. So the kind of candidate that's works for ZS, for example. I've also had a lot of people who worked in pharma companies itself, but in data analytics oriented roles, also Salesforce optimization roles. But these would be internal to the company rather than for an external company like ZS, right? So typically the goals that we've presented for candidates in this niche are to do with product management in pharma companies. And product management in pharma companies is a very marketing role, and it's more brand management than product management, to be honest. Yeah. So those are the kind of roles that we've presented in the past, and it's worked very well. I've had people get into Kellogg. Undergrad, male, non-IIT. Does your score have that much of an impact during the selection process? As long as you are above a reasonable target score, I think it's fine. So if your college graded you on a 100-point scale, have something that's better than 65 points, right? 60, 65. If it graded you on a 10-point scale, then have something that's better than 6. If it graded you on a 4.0 or a 4.3 scale, have something that's better than 3, right? So as long as you passed the acceptable bare minimum, I think that's fine. Everything else depends on your GMAT, because that's something that's a common platform which colleges can use to compare somebody from one grading system with somebody from another grading system, right? Definitely, if you have impactful work experience, there's nothing like it. So that is going to have a lot more weightage, and your GMAT score is also going to have a lot more weightage. 4 years of experience in automotive R&D, but my profile lacks management role and leadership experience. How much score should I target to get into PGPX programs at IIMs? If you're looking at IIMA, maybe a 730 or so. For IIM Bangalore onwards, I think 700, 710 should be good. I used to be in automotive R&D myself at some point in time, so definitely a high five to you, and I wish you all the best as well. In terms of displaying leadership, I'm sure, or rather, I hope you've taken up leadership positions in certain projects that you delivered for your internal clients. So even if you did not manage a team, you may present your project management as leadership experience. I have one UG at an NIT and two master's degrees. Graduated from a top 3 information school in the US. 10 years of international work experience in the US and UK. Work for Amazon. My chances for London Business School, Judge, or INSEAD. I think you have great chances. It really depends on how you present the goals and why you are looking for a third master's degree at this point. So I think these are some of the things you need to explain in your application. You will also need to explain why you are going for a regular MBA program at this point in time, and you need a good GMAT as well. So, provided you are able to pull off these things, uh, from a candidature point of view, you seem to be a great candidate. Samarth has a question: by what time should a person schedule a call for profile evaluation if looking for R1 intake, giving GMAT time in July? Um, I'm assuming you're talking about August Academy. So definitely let us know as soon as possible. Now, I will have to put forth a little bit of a caveat here. We are finding it a little difficult to take out time for individual profile evaluations, but we are making do. I answer about 5 to 8 emails personally every day myself. So these are people who are writing in with their questions, and I'm sending them their profile evaluations by email. So this is something that I'm doing. We also organize Zoom Hangouts every once in a while, and we also have other uh, forums under which we allow candidates, prospective applicants, to get in touch with us, and we definitely make it a point to answer people's questions. All right. So this is just a little bit of a caveat with regards to individual profile evaluations, but we are able to do profile evaluations. Okay. It's just using technology and some sort of efficient usage of time. With regards to your more direct question, we have already started signing up people for round one. And we are, yeah, I don't know how long we will continue signing up people for round one at least, but definitely try to get in touch as soon as possible. And, I mean, there's always round two. Yeah, I think Nikhil has put up our website here, which is mbaadmissions.augustacademy.in. You may log into our website and you may click on the link which says schedule a profile evaluation. And, we just ask for 4 data points, of which only 3 are compulsory. Your name is compulsory. Your email address is compulsory because, we need to know how to get in touch with you, and your phone number is compulsory. There's a field for GMAT. If you have a GMAT, fill it. If you have a GRE, you may fill in that as well. And if you don't, you may just say, "Hey, I'm in prep," and press submit, and then we'll get in touch with you. Thank you, Nikhil, and thank you, Abhijit. And very nice interacting with Harshal and Shwansh. So all the best, guys. And if you have any questions, definitely please get in touch with us, and we'll try our best to help out.